What makes Zoro's character really interesting is not just the fact that he's super strong and super badass, but it's the fact that this man uses 3 swords and sticks one of them in his mouth and somehow makes it work. So how he increases his strength by getting new swords and upgrading his swords has been one of the most fascinating things in the story. So today I want to talk about Zoro's swords and how he could potentially upgrade them or maybe replace them until we get to the final 3 swords of Zoro. But let's start off by talking about Zoro's current swords because I think there's a chance that a couple of them don't even change. So to start off, since Logtown, Zoro has had Mado swords, and Mado is just a standard high quality sword. There's different ranks in between there as well, which we'll get into, but Mado in itself is going to be high quality and pretty well known, at least to like sword nerds like Tashigi. So since Logtown, Zoro has had 3 Mado swords with him at all times, so he's not really going around carrying any bum swords. But within Mado, there are still different grades of swords. At the lowest level, it's just called a grade sword. It's like the most standard. It's still very high quality. It is a Mado, but there's not like a limited number of them. I'm guessing you could get your hands on a standard grade sword if you looked for it. And right now, ironically, Zoro actually has a standard grade sword with the Sandai Katetsu, and honestly, that leads me to believe that the Sandai will get replaced. It's pretty amazing how long that sword has stuck around with him throughout this whole journey. He's had it since Lockdown, which is what, like chapter 100 or something like that, so it's been like almost 900 chapters that he's had the Sandai Katetsu. I do think it's a unique sword in that it's a cursed sword and how it brings out like the bloodlust in you. I do hope that idea gets explored more within the story, but I don't think the Sandai is going to be sticking with Zoro for much longer. But above the standard grade is the skillful grade sword, and now you're kind of getting into a little more rare territory where Zoro had one of these before, the Yubashiri. He got that from the sword guy back in Logtown, and these are actually pretty rare swords because there are only 50 of them in the entire world. And while Zoro did have one of these swords with the Yubashiri, unfortunately that sword got dusted when he fought Captain Shu in Ini's lobby. Captain Shu, by the way, one of the most underrated characters, just this guy with the rust fruit, a full counter to swords before we found out about Haki. But yeah, one of the 50 skillful grade swords, gone, just like that. Now, as far as this level of swords, I don't think Zoro is going to be getting any more swords at this level. I think he's kind of clearly above that level at this point with his swords and will only keep upgrading. Which leads us to the next level of the great swords, which is kind of hard to say, but now we're getting into pretty rare territory. There are only 21 of these in the entire world, and ironically, Zoro has wielded 3 of these swords. He currently already has Enma and the Wado Ichimonji, and before he has Shusui as well. Beyond that, the only 2 known great swords are the Amino Habakiri and the Nidai Katetsu. Now, with the Nidai Katetsu, we get to our first real contender for Zoro's next sword. This sword was just recently introduced in Wano when Luffy snatched it from Hitetsu, and right now it really doesn't have any owner. The only problem is that it's a cursed sword and Hitetsu is very unwilling to give it up. But because Zoro has a lower grade Kitetsu with the Sandai, which is just a standard grade sword, and now we have the Nidai Katetsu at a great sword, it seems like a very reasonable upgrade to make from the Sandai to the Nidai. And I think it's a good guess, like it could definitely happen. Like, why else would you showcase this really great sword if you're not gonna have it be used in like a full capacity, not just Luffy grabbing it and like punching people with it? And it is a very high quality sword as well, so Zoro getting it would make sense. But I do feel like if Zoro gets the Nidai Katetsu, he will have to end up with the Shodai Katetsu, which is the next level up at Supreme grade. A lot of people speculate that Gorosei Gandhi has that right now, the bald Gorosei that's carrying that wooden sword. I believe the hilt looks kind of similar to the Kitetsu sword, so that's why the speculation is there. But yeah, the progression of the Kitetsus could definitely be a path for Zoro's swords. Maybe in Wano right now, Zoro's going up against Kaido, he tries to cut him, and his other 2 swords are fine and they stand, but the Sandai is like too weak and it snaps. That's another thing you have to consider. Like, Zoro getting a new sword, there has to be a reason for it. He hasn't just been like, oh look, that's a better sword right there, and let me just switch it out, screw this sword. He cares a lot about his sword. Even like when you saw he lost Yubashiri, he like dug a grave for his sword. Like, he really cares about these swords. So although I think the Sandai will get replaced, there still has to be a reason for it, but it could simply be like it breaks against Kaido. Now, if Zoro goes from the Sandai to the Nidai, I think that opens up the path of explaining the cursed swords more, and maybe it's a lot more effective, the bloodlust thing. With the Sandai, it was like in the beginning, Zoro had this badass moment of tossing it up, and then it kind of like spun off his arm and didn't cut him. But beyond that, there really hasn't been major showcases of him like trying to rein in the bloodlust of the sword. Maybe Oda has explained it in the SBS, but as far as in the main story, that element has kind of been neglected. So if Zoro goes from the Sandai to the Nidai, I hope that element gets gets brought back more. I'm definitely not mad at this idea. I can definitely see it happening, and like I said, it definitely opens up that pathway to the Katetsu progression where Zoro eventually gets a Shodai and gets his hands on another supreme grade sword. Because at the end of the day, I do believe Zoro's 3 final swords will be all supreme grade black blades. Now, if you're unfamiliar with black blades and supreme grade, you might be wondering how exactly is this gonna happen. There's only 12 supreme grades in the entire world right now. Does that mean Zoro's gonna get rid of all 3 of his swords and have to find 3 new swords to replace it? The answer is actually no, because in Wano, we found out a lot of information about number 1, how black blades are made, and number 2, the potential of increasing your sword's rank. First off, we found out the reason Shusui is a black blade is because it was forged through the battles of Ryuma. So that gave us a little more knowledge on black blades and how they're made. They're not just coming as like black blades, it's through battle and your own strength that you're able to really turn a blade black. Now at the same time, Hitetsu also explained to Zoro, Enma has yet to become a black blade, so depending on if you're able to do that, it could potentially increase its rank. Now some people have argued against the idea that this actually means jumping a grade, because it came in this really quick speech bubble and it's not as clear as it could be, but because it's referred to as rank, I really think it does mean jumping a grade. And to me, this also makes a lot of sense because now it opens up a pathway for Zoro to get 3 supreme grade swords without having to get like 3 different new swords. Now I can already hear some people commenting below,
oh, Zoro doesn't need 3 supreme grade swords. It's not about the swords, it's about the swordsmanship.
No, shut up. Like Zoro having 3 supreme grade swords would be badass. I want to see it. Plus, it would kind of tie into the idea that Mihawk has a supreme grade black sword himself with Yoru, so I think it would make sense for Zoro to surpass Mihawk in a way and wield 3 supreme grade black swords. He's gonna be the world's greatest swordsman, possibly the GOAT. He should be wielding the best he can. Maybe it doesn't happen, but in this video, that's what we're going off of. So yeah, what we learned about black blades and how it can raise a sword's rank really makes the path easier for Zoro to get 3 supreme grade black blades. Now, one thing we do have to note is that just because a blade is black doesn't mean it automatically becomes a supreme grade blade, because Shusui after all is a black blade, but it's still a great grade sword. So first off, that kind of adds to the story of Ryuma. He might have been for most of his life carrying around like a skillful grade blade and still became the sword god and turned his blade black. But yeah, this information tells me you probably still need a great grade sword and turn it black for it to jump into the level of supreme grade blade. Well, it just so happens Zoro already has his hands on 2 great grade blades, so if he's able to forge both those blades into black blades, he might have 2 supreme grade black blades. So the Wado Ichimonji and Enma, maybe he keeps them both. Well, first off, the Wado Ichimonji, I'm almost positive he's gonna keep that. That's like his keepsake for Kuena and like how to remember her and their dream together. There's no way he's gonna really get rid of that sword. Maybe there's the slightest chance of him replacing it, but at the very least, I don't see him getting rid of that sword until he defeats Mihawk and claims the title of the world's greatest swordsman. But yeah, overall, I just don't think the Wado Ichimonji is gonna get replaced, so I think he's gonna end up turning that blade into a black blade, which by the way, with that blade having like a white hilt, it's gonna look badass once it turns black. Now with Enma, because of Hitetsu mentioning like you could turn Enma into a black blade and make it jump a level, it kind of makes you think that maybe he's gonna keep that as well. And I do lean towards him keeping it at this point, especially because he just got it so recently and there's been talk about him turning it into a black blade and making it jump a rank, but I'm definitely less confident in him keeping Enma than the Wado Ichimonji. It's possible Enma is used as a device to tell us about turning his sword into a black blade and making it jump a rank, but then maybe Zoro fails or something and Enma breaks and he's like loses it or something. I don't think that's that likely to happen, but it's still possible. But more likely than not, I do think Enma is getting kept because he literally just got this sword, like, so for him to lose it so fast somehow and replace it, it just doesn't feel right. Plus it's incredibly unique of how it controls the haki of the user and how powerful it is, and with it being Odin's sword as well and Zoro being a pirate and a great swordsman, I think it makes sense that he keeps it and then turns it into a black blade. So for now, now I'm gonna go off the base of Zoro keeping Emma and the Wado Ichimonji with the intention of turning both of them into Black Blades. But there's still the Sandai Katetsu, which we mentioned is just your standard grade Medo sword, and even if Zoro does turn that into a Black Blade, it's probably not going to jump all the way up to a Supreme grade. So what can it be potentially replaced by? We already kind of talked about the Nidai and how that's definitely possible. Maybe Zoro ends up getting the Shodai at the end. But I do want to point out one thing about that path of Nidai and Shodai. It would mean that Zoro would have to somehow lose the Nidai Katetsu as well so he could get the Shodai Katetsu. And I think that actually makes it less likely that he ends up getting the Nidai Katetsu, because I don't think there's gonna be many more cases where Zoro loses his sword where it's like destroyed or breaks. I think he's super strong already and we're getting close to endgame. He's getting close to his goal of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. He's been talking about how there's nothing that he cannot cut. So I honestly think this fight against Kaido is probably the last time for him to be like, well, that was a lie because this dude is an absolute monster and I can't cut him, before like overcoming his limits and surpassing his limits, shout out to Yami, and cutting Kaido. Or killing him, beheading him, whatever you want to believe in. But yeah, that's really my counter for Zoro getting the Nidai, is that because if he gets the Nidai, I feel like he has to get the Shodai, and that would mean he will have to lose the Nidai again. Now, if he doesn't get the Nidai, you might be wondering like, then what happens to the Nidai? Is it just gonna be there and useless? I'm actually a big fan of Brook getting the Nidai Katetsu. You have this skeleton that's like connected to the underworld with the soul fruits, getting this cursed sword. That would be pretty badass. In general, I just want Brook to get a new sword. Like, Zoro's out here with 2 great swords and another Medo sword, and Brook's over there with a sharp walking cane. Somebody get Brook an upgrade, man. Like, we're in Wano. Can we get him a good Medo sword at least? But yeah, we'll see what happens with the Nidai, but I think there's definitely a chance there that Zoro gets that sword. But there's plenty of other options as well, which includes the vast amount of unknown great swords and supreme great swords that we just don't know yet. There's still 16 great swords that we don't know, and also another 8 supreme great swords that we don't know at all. And I think with these, we will find out what all of them are. Maybe not all in the story. Maybe Oda will come out and explain it in SBS eventually, but at the very least, like the 8 supreme great swords and the whole total 12 of them, I feel like that's something you have to showcase and explain. Like, we don't need to see all 50 skillful great swords, but the 12 supreme great and like the majority of the great swords, like, I want to know what those are. Now, I will note, I'm pretty sure we have not gotten the names and the grades of the swords of the scabbards yet, so that could definitely fill in a lot of spaces. We saw Kinemon has 2 swords himself. That could be another 2 great swords. I don't think any of them has supreme great swords. Like, Odin even didn't have any, so it wouldn't make sense for like Kawamatsu to just bust out a supreme great sword. It's like, haha, I had this the whole time. But yeah, I think after this battle, we'll get some information on the great swords and kind of fill in those blanks a little bit. And it's very much possible that some of those great swords belong to like former daimyos of Wano. And guess who was like a former daimyo of Wano? Yasuye. Shimotsuki Yasuye. Shimotsuki village, Roronoa Zoro from Shimotsuki village, Yasuye Zoro. You seen the connection here? That's all the One Piece theorist moments I got within me today. But yeah, maybe that's a thing. Like, we know there's a connection with Zoro and the Shimotsuki village, and for those of you who don't know and did not read the SBS, Shimotsuki Kozoboro, the guy who made Enma and the Wado Ichimonji, left Wano 50 years ago, and he's actually the one that made the Shimotsuki village that Zoro is from. And he's also the father of Koshiro, which makes him the grandfather of Kuina. So clearly there's a connection there, and I'm sure that will get addressed somehow in the main story. It just doesn't feel right that that's just gonna get addressed in a side SBS. I don't think Zoro's a Shimotsuki himself. We've known his name this whole time as Roronoa Zoro, but it's very possible that he's still somehow connected to that family. Maybe Yasuye turns out to be his like 3rd uncle from his cousin's side, and like they had a great relationship in Wano, so like it could be a way where they take Yasuye's old sword and give it to Zoro. I'm sure like Kaido and Orochi took away the daimyo swords when they killed those guys. And like these are daimyo of Wano country. I'm definitely expecting them to get some really good swords. So with the whole Shimotsuki connection there, I think Yasuye's former sword could definitely work as an option for Zoro to replace the Sandai Katetsu. And of course another Shimotsuki is Ryuma, but I don't think Shusui is gonna be returning to Zoro. First off, it's already a black blade and he's not gonna be able to really upgrade it. Plus he relinquished relinquished it already. I don't think people would be like, oh, you did a great thing and like cut Kaido or something, we're gonna give you this sword now. I think there will be a moment where Zoro goes and visits Ryuma's grave and they have a moment there and like he kind of like, I don't know, prays for him or something, like just shows some respect. But I don't think he's taking Shusui back. Another great sword I don't think he's gonna get is the Ami no Habakiri. That's Momonosuke's sword. Even if he's not using it now, he's gonna eventually use it. But yeah, a potential great sword from the Shimotsuki clan, maybe something to do with Yasuie. I think that's an option for Zoro. Another option is maybe Kozaburo left behind another great sword in Wano. That's another connection you have to look at. The two great swords Zoro has right now, Wado Ichimonji and Enma, are both crafted by Shimotsuki Kozaburo. So if there's another sword left behind by Kozaburo, that could kind of complete the trifecta for him. So overall, I think it's very possible that another great sword pops up that replaces the Sandai Katetsu for Zoro. Now, as far as the other 8 supreme grade swords go, I actually think the majority of those are under the control of the world government. Like maybe that was one of the first things that they did. They went to Wano and like confiscated all these high quality swords and bounced out of there and just haven't bothered them since. It would set up some great swordsman battles for endgame as well. And if that's honestly the case, I don't think Zoro is gonna end up taking any of those swords. I would like the idea that he had 3 great swords and shows up to that final battle having made all of them into supreme grade swords himself and kind of shocks like the world government and the Gorosei and all that. It's like, oh, I thought we took all these supreme grade swords, how did you get 3 more? I think that would set up a nice fight for the endgame final battle against the world government. It's possible Shiryu's sword is one of the supreme grade swords as well. The idea that there's still a supreme grade out there that's unclaimed that Zoro could kind of get his hands on, I don't really see it happening. I did mention like the Shodai Katetsu if you follow that progression of the Katetsus, but I actually like the idea of Zoro getting another great sword better and him turning 3 great swords into supreme grade black blades. By the way, the words great grade is just as hard to pronounce as it sounds. But yeah, it is possible maybe Zoro finds another supreme grade blade out there. But the final idea that I find really interesting, that I really like, is how about Zoro gets his own damn sword? Like all his swords are like somebody else's sword for keepsake or carrying on somebody's will. But if he's gonna be the GOAT swordsman, like he needs his own sword. He's in Wano right now. I could definitely see like he does something great, cutting Kaido, killing Kaido, whatever you want to say. After that, maybe Hitetsu gets all the other swordsmen of Wano. It's like, oh, we gotta make this dude his own sword. And then they all get together and maybe not make a supreme grade sword, but make another great sword. I think that would be badass, like him getting his own uniquely designed sword, built, suited to his own powers. Like Mihawk's Yoru, do we think he like found that from somebody else, or like is that his own sword that he continuously forged into a black blade through battle? Kozuki Oden, the Ami no Habakiri, and Emma were specifically crafted for him. I think Zoro definitely deserves his own sword. We could see it like getting designed and all that. Him naming it would be a cool moment. At the end of the day, this man has 3 swords. At least one of them should be his own. Some people might say he doesn't need it because he has the Wado Ichimonji, but to me, I think it would be fire if he got his own sword. But yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on what Zoro's final swords will be. But what about you guys? How do you think Zoro's gonna upgrade his current swords? Do you think he's gonna get any new ones? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please hit that like button. It helps a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to keep up to date with this channel, you gotta hit that subscribe button and hit the bell to join the notification crew. The King Pirates crew now over 6,710 members. If you want to interact with your fellow crewmates, the King Pirates Discord is linked in the description below. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. I'm DKing4, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.